Once, there was a young girl named Sue who could run in an unusual way. Sue would fall asleep, and once asleep, she would find herself in a peculiar world run by sinister creatures. These creatures had long, dark tentacles that they would use to ensnare their victims. Sue was never worried because she knew she had the power to control everything in her dream world. That changed one night when Sue fell asleep on a car ride with her parents to the beach. As Sue drifted off to her slumbering world of mystery and horror, she noticed something was off this time. Usually she felt she could wake up at any moment if she thought things were too scary. This time, however, something clouded her ability to sense the real world from the ties of this darker shadow world. While this made her feel different, she was still not too worried, as she knew this was her dream world and was in control. She would always just run from anything and never be caught. After all, she had never encountered anything she could not outrun. As Sue ran through the twisted landscape of her dream world, she realized she was being pursued by a creature, unlike anything she had ever seen before. Unlike the normal, dark and twisted creatures with long tentacles that were slow and almost zombie-like in movement, this new creature had a glow that almost erased the darkness of her dreamscape and illuminated the twisted features of its grotesque form. This creature possessed a speed and agility that surpassed anything Sue had ever encountered in her dream world. The new creature could also speak. However, it was hard to determine what it was saying at the distance she kept from it. Run, foe, ever. What was it saying, Sue wondered, and why was this creature so fixated on her? While the other darker creatures would run for her, they would typically lose interest in unobtainable prey and head for other, slower victims. But this creature, with its radiant and enigmatic presence, seemed to be different. As Sue continued to explore the dreamscape, she noticed it was becoming harder and harder to see the once vast landscape. Sue, finally out of the range of this new and terrifying creature, decided to see if she could think about why this trip seemed different than before. She tried to fit all the pieces together as she sat under a sizable decaying tree. Sue pondered over the strange circumstances of her dream and the relentless pursuit by the unearthly creature. Why is this time different from the last, and why can I not wake up? She asked herself. Sue remembered waking up this morning, knowing she would be headed to the beach with her parents. She was so excited as this was her first summer vacation trip. Sue recalled quickly rushing to the car, packing bags and grabbing all the extra beach toys needed. As Sue sat and reminisced on this morning's events, she wished she could go back and never fall asleep on the car ride. She thought, what if I never wake up and miss my whole trip? What if... Sue quickly realized that she had sat for too long and that things around her were getting brighter, a sign that this new creature was getting closer, and it was time to run again. Sue had let the creature get close enough this time to hear the screeching words coming from its mouth. It was more like nails on a chalkboard turned into a horrifying melody. You can't run forever. Sue wondered what this thing was and why it wanted her so badly. With no time to think, she looked toward the creature and saw that her dreamscape was not only being consumed by the light, but that what was left after it passed was nothing. No land, no sky, no grotesque monsters with tentacles ready to capture its prey. Simply nothing. What could this mean? And why was she being pursued by a creature that seemed to defy the rules of the dreamscape? As Sue continued running, she noticed she felt slower and tired. For the first time ever, Sue felt tired from running in her dream. This was very alarming, as Sue just figured real-world effects on her body would not affect her mental body. As Sue ran, her legs grew heavier and weaker with each step. It was as if her energy was being drained away by some unseen force. Sue started to think again. We loaded the car, started down the road, and then everything went dark. Wait a minute, Sue realized. I felt like I was falling, but why? Why did Sue feel this way? Sue had hardly any time to think about this as she heard a new voice, different from the creature chasing her, saying, "Don't go into the light." Sue thought to herself, "No kidding, Sherlock. But she did not know why or what to do, other than to let her last bit of energy out and fall victim to the pursuing creature. Sue fell to the ground, finally out of energy. She stood and turned to face the creature and accept her fate. As the creature moved closer, she noticed the almost human look of its figure, like a beautiful lady with a long dress on, and a sweet, inviting smile that comforted her. Sue, Sue, you can't run forever. As Sue reached out to the creature began to change form into something more otherworldly. The skin of light began to almost run off the lady's face to reveal a skull with sunken eyes and sharp teeth. The creature's once inviting smile turned into pure terror, and her once welcoming embrace turned into a cold and empty void of hollow desolation. Sue's heart raced as she acknowledged the true horror she was facing. With a surge of adrenaline, Sue's mind snapped back to reality, filled with the chilling realization that she couldn't escape this nightmare. She was trapped, caught between the realms of dreams and reality, unable to outrun the horrifying creature that haunted her every step. The creature inched closer, its bony fingers reaching for Sue's trembling form. As Sue stared into the creature's hollow eyes, she knew her fate was sealed. Just then, a jolt of energy vibrated through Sue's body, and she found herself with the power to run just a little farther. She began to run to the voice that she heard earlier. "Don't go into the light." As soon as Sue began to run towards the voice, a blinding light engulfed her surroundings. She heard the creature scream as if it was a murder of crows. "You can't run forever." The light consumed Sue, and she found herself standing in an unfamiliar place. She looked around, disoriented and afraid. The air was heavy with an eerie silence, broken only by the faint whispering of distant echoes. "Don't go into the light." Sue's heart sank as she realized that there was no escape, no refuge from the horrors that pursued her. As she stood in the light, she saw it as if it was a movie at the start of this morning. She saw herself get into the car and her mother and father laughing and talking about how much fun they would have. She saw the moment she fell asleep, but continued to watch herself, asleep in the car, instead of going to the dreamscape. She saw the 18-wheeler cross the line, and her vehicle crashed and fell off the bridge they were on. Sue thought that the falling feeling must have been when the car went off the bridge. The creature stood at the doorway, pointing at Sue. Behind it was a dark room, so dark not even the light from the creature could light it. Sue asked the creature who it was. With the same horrifying melody it sang out, "I am the one many fear and few embrace willingly, the cold you feel when drifting to sleep, the nightmare that haunts your deepest fears. I am called by many names, but you may call me Death." Just then, a hand emerged behind Sue and grabbed her, pulling her away from Death quicker than she had ever moved in the dreamscape. Death's face grew angry and shouted, "No, she is mine, she cannot run forever." "Beep, beep, beep." Sue woke to the sound of footsteps and the blinding glare of fluorescent lights. As her sight returned, she saw a man wearing a doctor's coat saying, "It's good to see you awake. We thought we lost you there for a little." Sue's heart raced as she realized that the horrors she experienced were not just a dream, but a glimpse into a terrifying reality. As the doctor explained her condition and the extent of her injuries, Sue couldn't shake off the lingering feeling that death was still lurking just beyond her reach, waiting patiently. The doctor told Sue that she needed to rest, and as he walked out the door, he turned around and said, "Now don't go running off again, Sue." I stumble through the dreamlike terrain, legs heavy, exhausted, and ready to surrender. I can either sit down and let the beast take me, or I can stand and fight. My heart pounds in my chest. I can sense it, the menacing presence that lurks in the shadows. The hellhound. I've always been plagued by the most vivid of nightmares. In the waking world, I'm just a regular guy, going about my everyday mind-numbing life, but in the realm of dreams, I'm hunted by a relentless creature from the depths of hell. Night after night, the hellhound hunts me, its fiery blood-red eyes and gnashing teeth shadowing my every step. Every nightmare begins innocently enough. with me wandering around burnt-out wastelands, searching for any sign of a way home. But they never stay that way. Nightmares can be twisted. They have the ability to make the most sane of minds lose control. A growl echoes through the dream, sending shivers down my spine. I pick up my pace, peeking over my shoulder, only to catch a momentary glimpse of a shadowy creature. My instincts scream at me to run, but to where? The vast wasteland has nothing to offer but desiccated barren trees, brown plants, and miles of debris. As the nights wore on, the hellhound closed in, its presence growing more vivid with each passing dream, screaming arms and legs thrashing, even tearing chunks out of my own hair and skin, as I felt its hot breath on the back of my neck. A reminder that I was never truly alone in the burnt-out wasteland of my nightmares. I no longer calmly wandered through the wasteland. I ran for my life as the hellhound materialized before me. I now understood its need to hunt me in my nightmares. Its coal-black fur was near damn impossible to see. Panic gripped me as I realized nothing escapes the fiery, blood-red eyes of the hellhound. The beast lunged at me. I awoke with a start, drenched in my sweat, my heart racing. The nightmares either mean something or are just a product of my overactive imagination. Little did I know, the hellhound was drawing nearer, readying itself to feast on my every fear. The nightmares took their toll on me. Dark circles formed under my eyes. Fatigue filled my bonies. Half the man I once was. I feared the nightmares would be the death of me. I became hell-bent on uncovering the meaning behind them. Each day became a challenge. The hellhound plagued my every waking thought, a parasite, using me as its host. I questioned my sanity, wondering if the beast was part of my deepest, darkest fears, or if a supernatural being had latched onto my soul. Either way, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. The nightmares had intensified. I ran faster as the hellhound became more ferocious, its howls now ingrained into my subconscious. One night, as the beast homed in on me, the strangest thing happened. My house materialized out of nowhere, its shiny red door glistening in the moonlight as I made a last surging dash towards it. Was this real, or just another wicked twist in my hellish nightmare? The real world appearing in my nightmares was certainly not a good sign, but I didn't have the strength or the time to worry myself stupid. Using the last of the energy I had left in my depleted legs, I bounded towards the door, glancing over my shoulder only to see that the beast had vanished. Coming to a halt, I scanned the area. Absolutely nothing, not a single trace of the beast that had been snapping at my heels just a second ago. I turn and face the door, only to be greeted by the blood-soaked razor-sharp teeth of the hellhound. I find myself armed with weapons, swords, shields, even axes. No idea where the weapons materialized from. I faced the creature head-on. The hellhound attacked with relentless rage, its claws tearing through the air, its fiery breath scorching everything around me. Each clash a matter of life and death, fought on the wasteland of my nightmares. The beast struck the first blow. Down I went, screaming in agony. A cloud of dust surrounding me as I hit the ground with almighty force. Blood sprayed from the open wound the beast had carved into my arm. The hellhound loomed over me. Sensing victory, a sinister grin spread across its face. A wave of energy surged through me. I drew up my sword with my unwounded arm and swung for the creature. It withdrew as I lashed out, connecting with its neck, the sword's blade glistening with its dark red blood. The wasteland had now turned into a battleground, the ground bloody beneath our feet. Sparks flew as my blade met the beast's claws. I felt a surge of power rise through me. The hellhound became more desperate in its attack. It became careless, allowing me to counter, cutting and slicing through its blood-soaked fur. I mustn't get complacent. One momentary lapse in concentration, and the beast would rip my throat out. As wounded as we both were, there would be no respite. Exhausted, drenched in blood and arms filled with lactic acid, still no idea how I was able to swing my sword, the battle continued. With a final decisive blow, I thrust the tip of the sword down through the beast's skull. The hellhound lay there lifeless, its fiery blood-red eyes glazed over. Gazing up, I was relieved to see the shiny red door of my house was still there. I hobbled towards it and gently pushed it open. I awoke, gasping for breath. The weight of the nightmares lifted from my shoulders. It was morning, and the realization hit me. I figured out the meaning of my nightmares. The hellhound must represent every single one of my fears. I battled the beast and emerged victorious. From this day on, I will tackle my fears head on. No more running, but yet, how do I explain the nasty gash on my arm? It was a dreary midnight, and a ravenous snowstorm wailed mournfully outside. Dougherty Walker sat in his old armchair by a lit fire as he read a curious ancient book from his weathered library, deep and focused. Though it was an interesting book in its own right, Dougherty had started to nod off and fall into a late nap for the night. As his head slowly drooped down, he heard what sounded like a faint, sing-song voice coming from the other side of the chamber door in its lockdown. He anxiously turned his head to look at his dog Dingo, who was lying on the floor. Dingo seemed to hear it too, as he had also perked his head up and was curiously looking at the door. "It's only the wind," Dougherty Walker muttered. "I left a window open in the hallway and now the wind is blowing in at my chamber door. Nothing more to it." He let out a tired sigh, stood up from his chair, and stared into the fireplace before him, watching the illuminating dance stretch upon his floor as he ran fingers through his hair. He knew why the howl of that wind had disturbed him so, the way it had sounded so much like someone singing low. He would recall an austere December, almost a decade ago now he would remember, the reason why he only wishes for the next morning as he escaped the past in his considerable assortment of books, though he tends to avoid any book that was written in a way meant to inspire nostalgia in their nooks. He did not know of nostalgia. The only feelings he invokes when thinking of the past are that of sorrow and mental myalgia. When he was a younger man in this house he now depends, Dougherty Walker once lived in this house with Molly Lynch, his girlfriend. During that bleak December all that time ago, there was a harsh and frigid winter storm, not unlike this one, though. The two had been snowed in for an amount of time which Dougherty still could not recall how long it had been. As the insufferable seconds, minutes, hours, and days drawled on, Dougherty and Molly experienced the worst case of cabin fever as they learned to despise each other's hon. One mournful evening of that wretched winter, Dougherty felt he could not take her presence any longer, and in a fit of blind animosity, he took a candlestick from a small table, this long, hateful finger, and struck Molly over the head with it. She slumped to the floor and blood quickly pooled around her head like a crimson vicar's halo oozing into a watery bed. Fearful of what repercussions he would face, even in this fit of passion, he took Molly's limp body to the bathroom and slumped her lifeless self into the bathtub in a most macabre fashion. From the closet by the front door, he brought a small scythe, and Dougherty's work was quick and lithe. Ignoring how he already missed her when Molly was like a precious cub, he sawed her apart and let all the blood drain down the tub. He would let the drained parts burn in the fireplace and would plan to call the police later, saying Molly went out into the storm and never came back at her hurried pace. Dougherty was never caught for his crime, and though the guilt weighed heavier on him with each passing year, he never dreamed of turning himself in. There would never come that time. As Dougherty quietly lamented, muttering the name of his lost love, he heard that sing-song voice howl outside his door again, and Dingo started to growl. Dougherty strode over to the door and flung it open in haste, but was only greeted by darkness, harsh and bold-faced. He peered into the longing darkness with a silence remaining unhinged. His imagination went to dark places of macabre whispers, thinking again of Molly Lynch. "Hello," Dougherty called out hesitantly, and an echo murmured back, "Hello," through the dark and empty hallway. He turned back to his study, closed the door behind him, and slumped back in his makeshift cubby. "Surely," he muttered, "there is an open crack in my chamber window. That song is only the wind, not some unseen foe." He turned his gaze back to Dingo, who turned his head nervously to the side. Dougherty checked the window, but it was sealed shut, not a crack for any whistle of wind to cut. He took his purple curtains and pulled them together, concealing the window and the endless window from view. But the singing returned, and the now understandable words came to Dougherty as if on a cue. "Meaty Doughty Walker." Dougherty spun around and shot his eyes from side to side, his heart thumping heavily in his chest, while his once heated veins had dried. "What do you come for?" Dougherty cried into the room, whose only occupants appeared to only be he and Dingo, and an omnipotent doom. Silence greeted him, save for Dingo releasing a whimper of a mournful hymn. "I hear you," Dougherty tried again. "Come out into view. You who sing there outside my door, tell me what it is you come for, I implore." Again the song would proclaim, and closer this time it came. "Me-tie, dough-tie Walker." Dougherty fell to the floor with his quivering eyes fixed upon his ever-seemingly eerie door. As he stared, he saw a quick movement near the fire and turned to see something fall from the fireplace and land before him as he began to perspire. He beheld a charred and rotted severed foot, and Dougherty cried in terror as he watched the macabre display of its toes wiggling through ash and soot. Another charred foot fell down the chimney, followed by their respective legs, which dripped upon the floor an inky substance of some dregs on the wooden floor. "Me-tie, Doughty Walker." The voice was so close now, and cold sweat beaded upon Dougherty's pale brow. He shuffled weakly far from the fireplace until his back was against the wall, and then he tried to pull himself to his feet, moving up the surface with a sort of crawl. Now a torso had tumbled down, and two arms, and a charred and smouldering head which wore a sickening frown. Dougherty Walker watched in fear as the severed and charred limbs assembled and reattached themselves in the firelight, and Dougherty hadn't even noticed that poor Dingo had died of fright. The broiled limbs had assembled themselves to a gangling woman who slowly and sluggishly began to dance with joints that seemed stiff and wooden. "Meaty Doughty Walker," she sang as she waltzed towards Dougherty. Dougherty was trembling as he stood frozen in place. All the blood had gone now from his limbs and face. He tried one more time, pleading, What do you come for?" Against his shirt, his fingers kneading. The grim and ghoulish woman opened her eyes and looked at Dougherty, and he saw they were the eyes of Molly Lynch solely. "I come for you,"